Well, hello and welcome to Black Money Matters. I'm your co-host, Karen Weaver, and I'm here with
Hi.
Jamaica Patrick, our other co-host, and we're here for another lively discussion.
Another episode.
So, Jamaica, first, let me say, before we introduce our guest, have we calmed down from last week? Because you remember last week we were
No.
doing this and we got news about the VP candidate and we started screaming during the show.
We have not come down. I have not come
I
down.
haven't
I'm
either.
still super excited.
Well, I am wearing my vote pin today,
That's
but
awesome.
I'm glad to be here. And we're excited because we have somebody that I think many viewers should know who she is, but we're going to do an introduction just in case. But her name is Dr. Pamela Pugh, and a lot of people around really the state of Michigan know her. She was our chief public health advisor for the city of Flint. And so she was the person that was at the table with us on behalf of public health and always speaking up and speaking out and making sure we were, not just saying health in all policy, but actually doing health in all policy at City Hall. But she's also known around the state because she's the vice president for the State Board of Education for Michigan. So she was an elected official before we got her. And so she wears a couple of hats. And so we are introducing her as our, what did we say is the title?
Our public health and education correspondent.
She sure is. She sure is. Dr. Pugh.
Hello, and I'm so happy to join you all, and I congratulate you both on doing this show. You know, we need fact-based, timely information that can get to people, and so I congratulate you and I commend you on this show, Black Money Matters. We're excited. I'm excited to be here today, and whenever you need me and invite me, I will be here.
Well, if your title is public health
And
and
education,
education correspondent, that means you're going to be here.
Regularly.
That's what it means. We have work to do.
Bells and whistles on. I will be here.
But you know what?
Regularly.
And she did join us for Behind the Scenes
Yep,
with
our
Tyra, and we had a
last-
really good
Well,
time.
actually, two behind the scenes. She joined us for behind the scenes with Tyra Hill, and that was fun.
Yes.
And she also joined us on last week when we had a panel
That's
of
right.
women talking about
That was the day after.
that was
the day after the VP
nomination. Yeah,
exactly.
And she was there, and we were talking about what that means and what a historic moment that was for us. That is for us.
And so you know what, Dr. Pugh, you're the first and only chief public health advisor we've ever had for the city, and people miss you. I just want to say that you did a phenomenal job, and I'm glad that you're in the role that you are as far as being on the Board of Education and having that public health background, because you've still been a strong, strong voice and advocate, not just for Flint, but for the entire state and kids. And so I'm glad you're here because one of the hot topics that everybody is talking about is school starting. And I remember, Jamaica, you remember when we first started, we said this came together as a result of coronavirus.
Yep.
And we said we were going to focus on economics because it crossed health and health outcomes and how health is impacted. It crosses education. We talked about business, home ownership. And so we have you here, Dr. Pugh, and you can talk about both of those things. And I think you told her we had questions, didn't you?
We have questions.
Because it's been all in the news.
It has.
You know, it was funny because yesterday, not only did I see it on the news, but there was an article that came out in MLive, and they were talking about school starting back. And they talked about a lot of communities around the state of Michigan. They didn't really talk about Flint and what was going on. But I'll tell you, one of the things I noticed was there was no uniform way that school was going to start back. And everything it's almost like a patchwork. So some places are going in the classroom, some are doing virtual. Some people are opting to homeschool, and then they had a mix of that.
mix,
So what do you say, Dr. Pugh?
You know, let me first start by saying that it was an honor to serve with the two of you, Mayor. Definitely under your leadership, and I miss the residents of Flint too. Let me start by saying that it was an honor and a privilege to serve them, and it taught parents, for children to go while their parents go to work. And so I do believe that that has been the rush to open schools. And I believe that just as you said in the opening, it's been done in a patchwork fashion. We'll get into, and I know you want to talk about the legislation that was just passed on yesterday. The Senate had a special session on Saturday. The governor and the Senate came together and put together a bill that helped the legislature in Michigan to reel back on that demand for students to go back into the classroom. So now, as of yesterday, there was legislation that was passed, and so there's more. The decision making will really be at the local level. So unfortunately, we will still have this patchwork approach, which I think can drive competition that's not necessarily good, but it's really going to be put into the locals' hands, and so they're going back and they're redoing and able to redo their plans. I do believe Flint Community Schools had already opted to go towards online for a certain period of time. I do believe that that is the case. So we're seeing that more and more with our school districts.
I think they said the superintendent for Saginaw pushed things back as well. But
yes, and so,
go ahead.
Yes, and so I had an opportunity to talk to a lot of school districts, whether I live in Saginaw, and so able to go back and forth with Dr. Roberts. I know a lot of these schools are really concerned about having kids in safe places, having kids, you know this, Mayor Weaver, having them getting the social and emotional supports that they need. And so that was a big part of his, as well as many educators' concerns. But he realized, in looking at the data, and I was able to have some conversations with him, that really we needed to draw back and give some more time to looking at making sure that the environments were safe, that many of the mechanisms were set in place that we didn't know need to be set in place before.
So I want to go. I want to talk a little bit about Flint Community Schools, and just a little bit about something that Dr. Weaver and I were discussing before we went on air today. So on yesterday, my niece was with me. My niece Mila, who's with me a lot. She was with me, and she had to do class, and so she went in my home office with her little computer that was provided, and she was doing her class. Now, for her, what's very, I think, fortunate with her is that she has the same teacher. She's had the same teacher for a couple of years, where even before COVID, the teacher had moved up with the students, and then this year they continued that again. So she has the same teacher again, same classmates, and she's a very smart kid. She typically gets all A's, and so but at some point, she made a mad dash out of her classroom, which was, again, in my little home office, into the living room, and she needed paper and pen because, she needed to do whatever they were doing in class. And so how is it looking as far as making sure that the kids have everything that they need? I know a lot of the schools are sending computers home, but how are the schools making sure that the kids have what they need as far as a quiet space? I remember her also at some point peeking her head out because we were loud in the house and letting us know that she can hear us through the doors. And so, space, internet access, school supplies, how are those things being addressed now that the kids aren't necessarily inside of a classroom?
That was one of the concerns that I had. And let me also say, I believe it was July 21st, Mayor Weaver, you helped us, and we put out information that went out broadly. We had media from up north, we had media to the south, and we talked about making sure that we were prepared for moving forward and all the things that needed to be done in order for schools to be prepared. And it became very apparent that we were not preparing ourselves to make sure that our children were adequately educated. We were putting more emphasis, again, there was more emphasis being placed on just opening up these buildings. So let me say that. So Jamila, to your question, we need more time, and so now the schools can kind of like have that space, not that much space because schools will be starting very soon, but to think through some of the issues that we knew were present last semester. We knew we had to, teacher education system, teachers had just a little bit of time to switch from what they had always done to an online system. So we know we need to make sure that we give teachers and educators more time to train themselves in that space, but also look for what worked well and what didn't work well. So we don't know all the things that we missed last year. So now that we've given this pause, some districts are going to go to online, and that gives them more opportunity to focus on that. So I will say that early on, there was some surveying that was done, and we found out that 1/3 of our students, so there's about 1.5 million children in the state of Michigan, and so 1/3 of them did not have access to electronic means of education. So we began to find ways, different communities began to find different ways to put those tools into the hands of the children. But we also know that with that, just as you just said, it's not just about having a iPad in your hand, but it's also making sure that you have the parents that are at home or someone that's there with the children to be able to walk them through these exercises and fill some of the needs that the teachers had. And then we also know making sure that there is access to internet. And so that's just not in Flint, it's just not in Saginaw,
Right.
but it goes all the way up north to the UP in our rural areas where
That's what I was going to say. You have some
Yeah.
issues in the urban areas and the rural areas. I know I was watching the Today Show, and they were talking about this, and they were kind of giving some advice, and they were talking about how, about school supplies for virtual learning, and they were saying that some communities, you can go to your library, and they were, letting parents know that the libraries can be helpful. But then they were also talking about there's some kind of, I don't know if you can go on the internet, a place called Swap Out, and get electronic, technical things, computers and different things at a low cost. So they talked about that. But when you talk about, you have two different issues going on, because you'll have the issue where some parents, you're saying they need to be available, and that's what they talked about, but they're trying to work. And how do you balance that? And then you have parents that don't have a job, that are just trying to make ends meet. And if they have a parent like me that's not technical, what do you do? And we know in certain communities this is going to be a bigger issue than others.
Well, just even going back a little bit, when we worked at City Hall, and you had put me as the point person for the census, one of the statewide meetings that we were talking about
This
internet
digital
access,
divide.
and what we were looking at was the fact that there are a lot of spots or places in Michigan that doesn't have internet access or the same level of internet access. And so we were talking about a census that takes about 10 minutes or less to fill out.
Right.
So when you're talking 5 days a week, these kids, they need to have access. And yes, I can go to the library, but what if I'm a frontline worker?
What if you're a frontline worker? What if you have some transportation issues? And there are so many things, and I was listening because I did hear Dr. Pugh saying, we're trying different things out, but some communities will feel like, once again, they're being experimented with. So I don't know, it's a big concern. And I know, Dr. Pugh, you are really speaking out loudly and strongly about the need for certain things to wait as far as school goes and the buildings and, when you get to the physical health piece of it and what we're doing and putting people back into enclosed spaces that don't have good ventilation and those kinds of things.
Because even before this, I know Dr. P worked a lot with the kids in Detroit on the lawsuit, and the buildings were a big part of that. So when you add in COVID,
Right.
now what?
You ladies are bringing up so much. Let's just start with Flint. When they were trying to open up the schools and without any type of data, baseline data, let alone a way for us to continuously monitor and address the needs of the water system. So let's just say that all of these school buildings have been closed starting March, not being open back up.
Right.
These districts were not thinking about turning on the water, just simple things like the water, let alone
Right.
looking at the ventilation.
And we certainly know about that one. We certainly know.
Yeah, so Jamaica, you bring up the point about the Detroit lawsuit. One of the bases for the lawsuit is that the buildings didn't have adequate ventilation, no heat in the winter, no air conditioning in the summer, and many buildings just don't have windows. So we know now that, well, let me say, many of us already knew, but it was finally admitted out loud that COVID is airborne. So the virus that causes COVID can be spread in the air. It stagnates. It can stagnate in air particles. And so, having said that, we have to make sure that schools are able to address their ventilation issues. And so, because many of these schools in Flint, Saginaw, Detroit have been neglected for so long.
Right.
We've
That's
been
right.
for parity, for funding, for equitable funding of schools. So all of these things are piling on top of each other. There in Flint Community Schools, there you all have been crying out around funding issues, and we don't even have to go into this. But I do want to tell you that Betsy DeVos, the current Secretary of Education in the Trump administration, is being sued by the NAACP, the National NAACP, as well as Dana Nessel, the state of Michigan, and there's California. I can't remember all the states, because she is trying to go in. The CARES Act dollars that we received for education to keep our education systems going as we face budget shortfalls like none other before. She's trying to go in. Betsy DeVos, Trump's Secretary of Education, has gone in to try to siphon funding from the CARES Act dollars to give to the richer private schools. And so she's being sued by the NAACP as well as the state of Michigan. I will tell you that the state of Michigan, I commend Dr. Michael Rice, our state superintendent of public education, because he was taking the CARES Act dollars that we received. Some of the funding has to be spent using Title I formula, but there was other funding that he was using to address this very thing that we're talking about, this digital divide. Now, with Betsy DeVos trying to give funding to her friends, to her private schools, not public schools, private schools that are typically well off, and take that funding and drive that divide even farther. So I do want you all to know that, as we're talking about.
Well, it's funny because I was thinking about it, and we have only 2 new schools in the city of Flint, and one is the Educare Center, and the other one is the school that's over there by the Cultural Center. But otherwise, we're talking about buildings that are old, and so you do have those public health concerns as well. And it was interesting because when we started off, one of the things I heard Dr. Pugh say was trying to separate economic health from public health, and it may and how you can't do it, and it doesn't make sense, and it just made me think of the I don't know if fight is the right word, but the clash that goes on when you try to separate physical health from mental health. You can't do it.
Can't do it.
And some things need to be hand in hand and be more holistic in the approach, and that's when you're going to get better outcomes. And so that's what I was thinking about when you were having that conversation. And
Absolutely.
go ahead.
And, no, I didn't. I was just gonna say, and that, you know, a lot of the concerns about having kids get back into the school buildings, that's coming from the educators or the, you know, the superintendents and some, it is this, now that's more of an issue of mental health, physical health. There's this thought that we need to get the kids back into these environments that help support their mental health as far as well as their physical health. But then there's those of us public health folks that say, hey, you know, we've got to first protect and make sure that they're going to be safe, well, that the teachers that are there with them, that the families that they go back to are going to be okay. You know, we're
Right.
talking about a disease that is debilitating people, that is, you know, it's taking people out. It's not like, you know, we don't know this. So we do have to address the physical health for the mental health, and those are real concerns that we do have to make sure. But again, we need to put focus on that first. You know, how do we assure that, even if they're not in those buildings? But then also making sure that, you know, as they're going into the buildings, we're dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and making sure that we're getting everything right. We're not cutting corners. We learned that in Flint. You know, so because I was in Flint, I'm very dogged about that and making sure that we're not cutting corners and not allowing kids and teachers to be experimented on.
So I have a question then, because when we were working for the city, you were there, and we adopted health in all policy, and we actually did it. We implemented that. Who does that at the school level? Is that something that's done statewide, or is it district by district? I mean, how do you make that
Individual
happen?
building.
How do you make something like that happen, health in all policy in school systems?
Well, you know, you brought that up during that July 21st meeting that went.
I keep bringing it up, don't I?
Yeah, yeah. And so again, and somewhere that I was in a meeting, I think at our last state board of education, our public meeting, I brought that up. These are things that you don't make friends doing, because
Right.
you have to force it on people. I did a podcast last week and we talked about Flint, and I talked about you, Mayor, and how you made sure that health, it wasn't just a term, it was that health really was woven into all policy. And so you have to push, you know, this, we have to push it. And I think for me, I've had friends that said, 3 o'clock, that said, Pam, you know, they're getting ready to start they're getting ready to start, they're going to try to do the sports, or they're going to try to do this. And my thought has been, we're going to put the right information out there and give alternatives. I will work on alternatives, but at the same time, eventually they're going to have to come back and say, you're right, we can't keep moving this way, because this is a disease that does not care about what people think,
Right.
people's timelines. It's going to show you that it is a real disease that will impact and affect everyone. And so that's what we've been seeing. We just saw, who was it? One of the universities in North Carolina, the professional ball team, different schools that we've seen in the South. You can't rush it. It doesn't care about your economy. You've got to worry about the people and those frontline workers, making sure that you're protecting them. And in doing that, the economy will be addressed. But the health and all policies approach, if you're a person who's only concerned about the economy, the best thing to do is to take that health and all policies approach to addressing the economy.
I want to talk about the economy and how different economic backgrounds, actually black people, are more impacted with COVID. But before we do that, I want to remind everyone that if you have a topic that you would like to see on Black Money Matters, or a guest that you would like for us to highlight or interview on Black Money Matters, please email us at blackmoneymatters2@gmail.com. Well, that's Black Money Matters,
The number 2.
at gmail.com. And please also follow us on Facebook at Black Money Matters. And it'll be the Facebook profile that will have my and Dr. Weaver's beautiful faces, as well as on our YouTube channel at Black Money Matters. And so, thank you, Dr. Kidd. And just going back to you, let's talk about COVID and how COVID is disproportionately impacting Black people as far as the number of deaths that we're seeing in that. Let's talk about, I've heard Mayor Weaver many times say being Black is an underlying condition, and let's talk about that right now. And so what are those statistics looking like as of right now?
So, when we first started off, those communities where there were African Americans, we could go up to 75 corridor, those were the communities that were hardest hit, and pretty much it has remained there. We can look at the statistic that again has pretty much remained that 14% of the population is of Michigan's population is African American. So African Americans comprise 14% of Michigan's population. However, when we look at COVID deaths, we make up about 40%. It's pretty much remained there. I haven't looked at the data this week, but that's where we stayed. And so when you look at Michigan across the country, and compared to other states, we are the highest when we look at the disparities between African Americans and whites. So the last time I looked at the data, we were 6 point. Our rate when you look at the data and you look at it and you take age into account, so it adjusts for whether or not we have more of an older population than New York has an older population. So when you look at those age-adjusted numbers or rate, Michigan is the second highest. I can't remember who was above us, but we're the second highest, and we are 6.3 times more likely to die of COVID than whites when you look at the age-adjusted rate. So that's pretty high. And so we can talk about what drives that. I wrote an op-ed some time ago, a few months ago, and we talked about just the education system in and of itself. If you don't have an education that adequately puts people on a trajectory to have jobs that then allow them to work from home, or whether we look at the living conditions of folks who have certain jobs, whether it's because they have to take mass transportation, they're forced to, or whether it's because they're on those frontline jobs. We can tie that back to the education system. But we know that some of it is we could say it's living condition. It can be forced living conditions. It's not lifestyle. It's just that there are proportions of people who have to be the frontline workers, have to be, take jobs that put them at a higher risk. So we can go on and on and talk about that. Then we can talk about underlying health issues that we've been talking about for years, because we've talked about how racism can thrust us into these having higher morbidity.
It's like fertilizer for these underlying conditions, because it's a constant stress that you deal with every single day of your life, and it takes its toll on you. So yeah, it does. It's like it fertilizes. It's like Miracle Grow for underlying conditions, and that's what we deal with every single day.
One of the things that really, I sleep good at night. I make sure I sleep good at night. But if there was anything that would make me stay up at night, it was the work that we started around water affordability and making sure that we address Flint's water rates, and making sure that not only were we changing out pipes and doing that ahead of time, but making sure that residents had access to clean drinking water in schools and their homes, but also looking at how could we make water more affordable. And we were really doing some cutting edge stuff with the group from out of Chicago. And I don't know if you got CNC, I don't know if that work is still going. But those are the types of things that kind of worry me at night. But when we look at as to whether or not the residents of Flint still are, those things are still being addressed. But when we look at COVID, tell you to drink water. If you don't have access to clean, affordable water, that's a problem already. And keep your immune system up. And if you're stressed out about any of these things, having access to clean water and making sure you can, pay your water bill if that's needed. Hopefully we're following the moratoriums, but then you also have to look at, you're being told to stay hydrated. So those were all things that at the start of this pandemic that were not necessarily the case, whether you look at Detroit or whether you look at Flint. So, we can talk about that, but definitely keeping your immune system up, and a lot of stress is an immune suppressor. Right. We can talk about the different attacks that we take because of the different attacks to your immune system and the different stressors that some of us wear and have because of these historical factors that we're talking about.
Or the different treatment that we receive. You go to the hospital saying, I feel like I'm having a heart attack, and they send you home, speaking firsthand, and say everything is fine. And you know it's not.
You know
it's not.
Or you tell them you're in pain.
Right.
And they don't adequately address that
so
pain.
So those kinds of things happen as well.
Yeah.
But you made me think about something when you were talking earlier. And you may say, no, we're going to save that for another show. I don't know, Dr. Pugh. But you were talking about sports and athletics. And we know that physical health is very, very important. I know we've been working on something. I didn't know if we could talk about that or not. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Rest. Yes, I do.
Look, we need to get it out. I mean, it's out, but let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. You want to talk about it?
Yeah. So, I was approached by the Michigan High School Athletic Association, and they were asking, this was in May, and they were like, Dr. Pugh, if we can get some buy-in from the Department of Education, from you, to get our kids back into spring, get them back into sports within a month or so, that would bode very well for the high school, because the Department of Education does not oversee Michigan High School Athletic Association, but they wanted that buy-in. And so I told them, there's no way that I could step out, head of public health and Dr. Caldoon. Matter of fact, I'm more on the conservative side of things when it comes back to putting our kids in harm's way. I told them, but what I will do is, I won't commit to that, but what I will do is look for some researchers, some folks that I know who can move this process along, and some, from the mental health and social well-being side of things. And let's get some athletes or some people affiliated with athletic teams that can talk to our children, and let's talk about how we can look at alternative ways of getting our kids moving. This is an issue. Michigan has one of the childhood obesity rates.
I was going to say, yes, exactly.
So I called my good friend, Mayor Dr. Karen Williams-Weaver, and I hooked up with Dr. Rebecca Hassan from out of the University of Michigan, and we linked up. Mayor
I was going to say, I called my good friend, Earl Puritan from the Pistons. Dragged him into it.
And so the four of us, we just started talking, and then next thing you know, we have the Detroit Lions, we have, we won't tell the others.
We'll wait, but it's something we've been working on really to address this. And I think it's going to... So we want people to look for that, right? Because it's
because we have other people coming on board.
Exactly.
And really, it's gotten a lot of media attention.
It sure has.
We kept hearing people saying, well, up and kids will be able to go right back to
We
their
don't know
normal.
what's going to happen.
There's no such thing as normalcy,
No.
especially right
No,
Right now.
no, not at all. And so I
So
just,
impact-
when you talked about physical health, it just made me, it reminded me of this other project we have been working on, and I just wanted to get that out
Because
there.
it all ties together.
It all ties together.
We talked about that on several shows, how it
Mhm.
all ties together.
Mhm.
Our economic well-being, our physical well-being, our mental well-being, it all, you know.
And money underlies so much of it.
Mhm.
Money underlies so much of it, especially when we're, go ahead,
Yeah.
Dr. Pugh.
Our sports teams have been giving to students and trying to. Did I lose you guys?
No.
We hear you.
Oh, everything started. I'm sorry. So anyway, we were able to get, while the sports teams are in flux and they didn't even necessarily know what they were going to be doing. We know all the money that's going into that, or the money issues surrounding that. But we're happy that they stepped up and they were able to see that this is the way to keep our children moving, get them moving, and it's at a time where once again we need to be thinking of innovative approaches as well as novel partnerships to keep things going. We can't get stuck in the way that we always did.
Right.
things, but we have to think
You know, because and think about it, it's going to be winter in a minute, really.
Right,
You know,
right.
time is really moving quickly.
Right.
So we're going to have to think of some physical fitness for wintertime too, and what people can do. So I'm looking forward to that expanding. I really am.
I'm over here laughing because I know, and I think I talked about it on the show before.
What?
How you had us
Get
do
Fit.
Get Fit Flint on Friday.
Look, and Pam, Dr. Pugh, she's going to have a little, we're going to do something
Ah.
through Black Money Matters too.
Well-
We're not done with that.
So are we gonna play Foursquare again? Did you guys get
I
all
don't know,
competitive?
but we're going to have health and all policy here
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
I would tell you, I did an annual checkup today, and let's just say.
Thank
that
you.
That the cheerleading and all of that Mayor Weaver and Earl Carrington,
Look.
Dr. Harrison has been giving me. She just gave me, my doctor today gave me that extra nudge. I've got to get moving. So I'm getting my get fit.
Good.
Get
Good.
this mindset.
I said we can't survive COVID and then let
Right.
everything else
Well,
fall
well,
off the
if you think
table.
about it, people talk about like I think they call it the COVID-20 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The people have been sitting at home, snacking, not going out. You know, because we're trying to social distance,
Right.
and you know, so you're not going out as much. You're only going out when it's necessary, and things like that. So you're not moving as much. So what we do need to be intentional
We're going
about.
to, right.
You
Maybe
know,
we'll have to do a behind the scenes that's
Yeah.
around some physical fitness
That'll be
active
fun.
things.
That'll be fun.
What do you think, Dr. Pugh?
I think that's good, and I'm looking up impact. People need to look up impact at home because though it's for young people,
It's for everybody, I think.
Everybody.
Right. I was going to say, right, it's for everybody. I mean, that's how it started, was for young people. But there are things in there that people of all ages can really, get something from and do and learn. So I think it's good because it goes across the age spectrum.
And maybe we can start there, by promoting impact at home, and then also see if we can actually keep up.
That's
So I'm going to put you on the spot for just a little bit.
okay. Jamaica's doing that one.
So we talked on last week about having a tip of the week.
Yes.
So-
Somebody emailed us and said we needed to have a tip of the week.
A tip of the week. So what would your tip of the week to our viewers be if you had to give us a tip of the week?
And she can pick any of those
Any
topics,
of
right?
those
It can come from health, education, either one of those.
Either one of those, or anything else.
Well, first of all, I would say, Mayor Weaver, you asked about implementing health and all policies. So I would suggest that anybody to explore what the health and all policies is, and or just, in practice, thinking, and so that would be my uh, that would be my first. There was something else that came to mind, but I do think that needs to be promoted in cities throughout the country, and I think that you therefore have a model for that.
And I have a tip, and it's probably a local one, but I thought about it before we got here, but I also thought about it because we have the vice president of the State Board of Education on with us today. And we know one of the things that's going to be going on in the upcoming elections are school board elections.
Yes,
And that's
right.
something people really need to pay attention to. I mean, especially, so I'm hoping with everything that's going on with schools and education and public health all together that people are paying attention to those local school board
Right.
elections that are coming up and talk to people. You were saying educate yourself about health and all policy. That's something that we should be looking at before we vote for
Right.
people is who has that education, that health and all policy that's running for the Board of Education and talking with them about that and how they plan on handling some of these things.
And that's really important, even more so during COVID, because Dr. Q talked about the legislation that was
Right.
passed. That is really that these decisions about when our kids are going back to school, how we are educating them
And how we're
moving forward. is local.
right, and how we're going to make up for some of these things where we know certain schools and certain kids in certain areas don't have access.
Right.
They don't have access.
Right.
And it's sometimes you don't have the money to have access.
Right.
And education should be a level playing.
Exactly.
It really ought to be. And so I want people to pay attention about these school board elections that are coming up. And if you're listening from someplace else, not just Flint, if they're going on someplace else.
Right.
What were you going to say, Dr. Q?
I say that's the point. People do not understand how important and critical school board members are. I mean, when you really put education in its proper perspective, Mayor, you and I, we have Southern roots, Jamaica, you do too. Those here too. I mean, education was such it was a field that was put up on educators, and education was put up on a pedestal. All of us, Tamika, knowing how critical education is to the survival of our community. But boards are a critical part of that.
Right, those people that are making decisions about your kids and about the teachers and where money goes and
How those
It's
things
our
are being
work,
distributed.
and you have to make sure you give people who will ask the right questions and won't stop until
Right.
those questions are answered. And so you're right, that this is very important.
And not just ask the right questions, but listen to us. I think one of the things that we don't always do is hold our elected officials accountable. And so listen to us. So if I'm a parent and I have an issue, making sure that I'm putting people in position to be able to address those issues, and continue to address those issues. And like you said, Dr. Q, ask those questions until they are answered. When we want to know, why funds are distributed equally across the board. We want to know, why some school districts get more for special education than others. Ask those questions, find out that information, and find out the why. Really, sometimes there's a reason, but I need to understand that reason. And so those local school board elections are extremely important.
Right.
Local elections across the board. I know we don't get a lot
I
of
know we keep
people.
talking about these local and state are just so important because that's where decisions are made that impact your day-to-day life. So I know Jamaica didn't ask me for my tip, but that was my tip.
No, that's an excellent tip. And it's like you said, right now we are having we have that local election
Right.
that's about to take place in November. We
Right.
have school board seats. I think there's going to be 2 seats
Okay.
up for grabs in Flint Community Schools for that.
And there are also going to be some seats at the college level. I mean,
Yep, Mott
we really
Community
need to be
College, I
paying
think there are 2
attention to
seats.
some of these kinds of things. And you see how, and sometimes you don't think about it until we're in a public health crisis.
And then you start looking for who's
And
in
then you
office.
look at, right, exactly. So I just think it's,
And for me, being on the state board of education, I I can work with the local school district. I mean, you all, Flint Community Schools has an issue, with equitable funding as it
correct.
relates to special education. So, talking to some of the board members and some of the folks within the school district, being able to go to the Department of Education and making sure that they did everything that they needed to do and exhaust all the authorities they have. And so those we have to link up and we have to be able to work together. And so those again, I can't stress and emphasize enough that those boards are critical. So pay attention.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. So I don't know. I just think that was some good information for people to have. And that was what we had talked about was while economics is the foundation of the show, it just crosses so many areas. Health and education being just two of them.
Two of them.
Just two of them.
But two extremely important ones, which is why
Exactly.
Dr. Pugh isn't a typical guest where she may come once or twice, but she is our
Well, she's going to be
health and
thinking of
education
some other, I know
correspondent.
she has other topics that we're going to be talking about as well. So,
Yeah, and I'll just say that I'll get off in just a minute, but things that we have to look for education. Tamika, you and I talk a lot about privatization, making sure that our funding to our public education system, that's going to be really critical right now because there's a lot of mischief, because there's validity as to what education is going to be. And we know we have to uphold and undergird our public education system, just like Betsy DeVos trying to siphon off dollars to private schools. We know that they will try to fund privatized education systems, so we have to be careful there. We know that funding that would have otherwise been used to address the conditions of some of these buildings, and we wouldn't have to be as concerned as we are right now of how the schools will be maintained during the pandemic, but some of that funding is going to developers. And so we have to really be in tune to where our children's funding is going. We could also talk about the school to prison pipeline. Our children are more likely to live in low-income districts where they are less likely to have access to funding to address issues in their school buildings. We could talk about, 50% of African Americans make up the Michigan prison population, and again, it's really for population. And we know that the dropouts are 3.5 times more likely to be in prison or be arrested. And I'm looking at another statistic: 68% of all males in prison do not have a high school diploma. So there's very much this link as to how our people will end up. And I think that it can circle right back to your topic
Well,
of black money back.
right, because whether or not you have a high school diploma or not, whether or not you have a trade or a college degree, all of those are markers for, and they don't always determine it, but they're good determinants of economic opportunity that you have. And so it's important. It's really important. It just seems like from everything you just said, Dr. Pugh, I don't know, how sometimes they say the moral of the story is stay woke.
Absolutely.
Stay woke.
And-
Pay attention.
Make sure your school, we gotta wake up to this investing in our schools and making sure we're investing. And I don't want to bring up that little explosive topic of defunding police. I don't necessarily.
Well, you can't bring it up when we have like 2 or 3 minutes left.
But
You have to bring it up. Right, she's like, and I've got to leave now, thank you.
I do.
let me just say, the phrase is explosive, but when you really dig deep and you start talking about making sure that funding is going where it should go. We
Right,
don't
in
have
all things, right.
about us ending up in that pipeline for
Right.
prison.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
we talk about Black Money Matters.
And and and,
Money
and when you look
Black.
at prisons being built based on third grade reading scores,
Right.
so there's a lot there,
There's a lot there.
that really starts separating us from economic opportunity. And so I know we're going to have a lot to
There's
talk
a lot
about.
to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Before you go, Dr. Pugh, I just want to change subjects really quickly, and talking about staying woke. Can you, if you can, if you can't, we understand, but can you talk a little bit about the convention, the Democratic National Convention, and your role in that? We have 1 minute left.
Yeah,
have
so
six.
I'm
Oh,
a
6
Democratic, I'm a
She
delegate
doesn't.
for the Democratic National Convention. Last year I was there with Mayor. I wasn't even working for the city yet.
We
but
had a
Mayor
good
and I
time
were
too.
meeting.
That
And
was
I'm
in
telling you,
2016.
Mm-hmm.
it's wonderful to see history being made. I'll just say I wish that we were able to be there in person. This is usually a time where the party just really comes together. You know, I tend to be more to the left leaning part of the family, but it's an opportunity for the whole family to come together and then really just come back home and really lead the charge. So we are excited about Senator Kamala Harris being on the ticket, the first female, and she is an African American female. And we really worked hard for that because she was qualified
Right.
as well as the African American choices. But we really worked hard to have to be able to have an African American woman to be on the ticket, and we're really excited. She's more than capable and qualified, and so we're excited about that. We didn't get to be in person and be there in the energy, but we can feel the energy right from our homes. And the good thing is that everybody gets to play a part. We all are seeing the same thing at the same time. We have morning meetings that are, this morning we heard from Senator Klobuchar, we heard from the chair of the Biden campaign, and so we get like some marching orders and some inside information on what we need to do to beat back Trump. There's a lot of trickery that's going on out there, and so talk about staying woke. We just all are getting this information firsthand, and we just need to go to work with it. Whether you're a delegate or whether you're enjoying it from your home as a layperson. So.
Well, one thing we showed is women aren't going away. I mean, because you think about it, when we were there 4 years ago, Hillary Clinton was there as the presidential nominee. Here we are again, and we have Kamala Harris as the VP nominee. I mean, we just keep showing how tough
it's
we
our
are
time.
and how strong we are, and we are not backing down. We're not going away, and it is our time.
It is our time.
It's our time.
It's our time.
It's been our time.
It's been right.
Let's say this: we need our brothers. We need our women of any color. We need our brothers to stand
And have our back.
guard,
Have
and
our
guard
back.
as we run this race forward.
So, Dr. Pugh, I know you said you had to sign off. You had something at this time. But before you go, can we just say thank you to you? Jamaica and I will wrap up. But can we say thank you for being here with us today? Because I think this is a topic that a lot of people wanted to hear about, is what do you do with school?
Right.
And, how do you handle this? And what are some of the issues and challenges? And what do we need to pay attention to? It's been like I said, it's been all over the news.
All over the news and social media.
Right, exactly.
And everything.
So having you come on at this time to be, with us, we appreciate it.
Yeah.
But you're not done.
No, not at all. Not even close.
So.
Well, I thank each of you. I thank you all for doing the show, for what it is that you're doing, for allowing me to be here, but also for just standing for our children. You all have been there, and we're going to continue to do what's right for them, and make sure that we safeguard their future. They are our future, So
Yeah.
we have to protect their future. And so I thank you all for doing that.
And we
And
want
so
people
I'm
to
going
look at impact at home, correct?
Impact, INPACT. Yep, at home.
At home.
All right, well, thank you so much,
Yeah,
Dr.
thank you. We
Pugh.
appreciate you.
Until next time.
And so thank you. So Jamaica, I think we need to remind the viewers, okay, it's Wednesday, we're on channel 17, Wednesday from 2 to 3.
Wednesdays from 2 to 3
And-
p.m.
and
then
Saturday-
a repeat episode Saturdays.
When you're up snacking on some popcorn.
Popcorn.
Pretzels.
With no butter.
Right, all that stuff.
Saturdays at 1 a.m. to
I
2
know.
a.m. So if you're a night owl like me,
I am
you know,
too.
you might want to watch Saturdays at 1 a.m.
Mhm.
or Wednesdays at 2 p.m. if you're home during the day. But also, anytime,
Yes.
we encourage people to watch us anytime on our Facebook page, which is Black Money Matters, or our YouTube channel,
Yes.
which is also Black Money Matters. And again, if there is a subject, a guest, a business, because we're going to be out next week. We're going to be out highlighting on location.
We're going to be,
highlighting.
right, I was going to say, we're going to be out
We're gonna
next
be,
week,
yeah,
out
on
and about.
location. So if there's a business that you think that we should highlight, please email us.
Yeah.
Black Money Matters, the number 2 at gmail.com. So again, that's Black Money Matters 2 at gmail.com. Send us the name of the business, contact information, and even a brief description, if you can, about the business or subject. if
Right, I
there's
was going to
something
say,
you
yeah,
wanna
send
know.
us, if there are topics people want us to cover, let us know what they are. And we have been getting some people emailing us, so
Right, and
that's a
two-
good thing.
2 more things I want to say about email. Again, Dr. Pugh is our health and education correspondent. So if you have a specific question about, your kid's school district in Michigan or what's going on with that, you feel free to email
Right,
us.
follow-up questions if you have
Yeah,
some,
we'll
we can
bring
get
her
that
back.
information.
As well, if you're a business that wants to be in the directory in Flint and Genesee County,
Email us.
that information and we will link you with Dewan Robinson and that group who's putting that directory together.
And when that directory gets together, we're going to have to bring him back
We
so he can
will.
show them what it really looks like.
Mhm.
But that will be exciting to have as that directory.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we're not going to say where we are next week, just out and about.
Mm-hmm.
So
You have to watch.
that's right, you have to watch. So thank you, and we'll see you next week, same place, same time at Black Money Matters.